South Africa is freshly into a state of disaster, and this brought on by load shedding, that persistent feature in our lives. This just 10 months after the COVID-19 national state of disaster was lifted. Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, Minister for Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, gazetted a renewed declaration of a national state of disaster on Thursday night, while President Cyril Ramaphosa delivered the State of the Nation address in Cape Town. To discuss whether or not rule of law matters during a national state of disaster and what we can expect under such provisions, I'm joined now by legal analyst Dr. Felix Dube. Dr. Dube, let's just try and understand in legal terms what happens once a national state of disaster has been declared.
Good morning, Erin and the viewers. So what happens when a national disaster is declared, several things will follow. The first thing is that there is a massive mobilization of ring-fenced resources that should be channeled to that process. But before that happens, you still have to have a legal framework that actually permits the declaration of a national state of disaster. Like in this instance, can we say that we have a national state of disaster? I would say at least I think we do, because a disaster, it is a progressive event or a sudden event that causes massive problems in society, loss of property, loss of human life, destruction to the economy that leads to corruption and all those things. So when they declare a national state of disaster, they are trying to mobilize resources that otherwise would not be available to those who are in charge of fixing that issue or dealing with that particular problem. So here, when we see the minister declaring a state of disaster, I think they are accepting that ESCOM is unable to supply us with electricity and that a higher intervention is needed. So what will then happen is they are going to mobilize resources, they are going to get the right people to look into this thing, but we are also going to have a problem in that it is not only ESCOM that has got these problems, Transnet has got the problems. Road infrastructure is crumbling. Critical infrastructure is being vandalized. So are we going to declare a national state of disaster for all these ones? So I'm just saying this so that we understand the context in which these resources will be mobilized at national government.
Touché, Dr. Dube, touché. Should we just declare a national state of disaster for governance in South Africa overall? When you raise things like roads, for example, rail infrastructure, poverty, unemployment, youth unemployment, education, the list goes on and on. You've highlighted a point about ring-fenced resources. The floodgates now open for potential looting. Of course, we've heard the president say that's not going to happen. ANC Treasurer General Fikile Mbalula insisted that if you look at measures to reprimand those responsible for looting during COVID-19's national state of disaster, all's going to be fine, he says. But what are some of the risks here?
I would say we really don't know, but we already have a precedent. In the previous state of disaster, there was massive looting of resources. That's because the state of disaster will unlock so much money and it will fast-track so many things that it becomes easy for those who are looking out to steal from the public to do so. Previously, the president actually promised us that there will be no looting of resources, that there will be nothing of the sort. But we saw it happening a lot. There was a massive money stolen. There was no lack of accountability. So I wouldn't say that I am confident that the same issue will not happen now.
That makes two of us, Dr. Dube. I suspect some of the rands and cents that will be released through this national state of disaster are going to go missing, I'm afraid to say. But if we look at what the president himself said on this national state of disaster, one of the things he emphasized was that it would allow for the lifting of load shedding for certain key areas. Hospitals, for example, I think was one. Water plants being another. Was it really necessary to announce this national state of disaster in order to save those kinds of key sites from load shedding? And just let us understand the real benefits of something like this beyond just the money.
I think there are two reasons for declaring this state of disaster. The first reason, of course, they want to give us an impression that they are really serious about this electricity issue, that they are doing something about it. But the reality is that the government is unable to deal with this issue. So in my view, this declaring of a national state of disaster is just a sideshow to, affirm to the public that we are not sleeping on this thing, we are looking at it. But going to the practicalities of it, I do not think that properly managed and resourced, ESCOM is unable to deal with the issue. It doesn't require such a huge intervention as an appointment of a specific minister and all those things. I'm of the view that it is not like that. And then we come to the issues of exempting hospitals and water treatment plants from this load shedding. I think it's a good thing. People are dying in hospitals because they can't get the necessary procedures because there's no electricity. I will upload that. But then we must also understand that exempting these water treatment plants and hospitals from load shedding actually means that we're in this thing for the long overhaul. They don't have an immediate plan to it. They don't have an immediate way to stop it now. So them doing it should assure us that we're in this thing for a long, long time.
We're in it for the long haul, as you say. To be fair on the President, he did mention that the Auditor General will be involved in monitoring the expenditure of monies. He also said the national state of disaster will enable the state to provide practical support to businesses in food production, storage and retail supply chain, including for the rollout of generators, solar panels and uninterrupted power supply. Of course, food security being an issue, not only has that been impacted on the continent by the Ukraine-Russia war, but climate change and then load shedding leading to millions of chicken carcasses, tens of thousands of litres of milk simply going to waste because of the load shedding crisis. I wanted to ask you, in terms of the legalities of this national state of disaster, what sort of scope is there for any legal challenge or sort of nuance to some of the provisions that Dr. Dlamini Zuma has signed into effect if people scrutinize them and find them wanting?
I'm of the view that as it stands now, the declaration of national state of disaster is solid in my view. That's because a state of disaster, as I just alluded, it is a progressive or sudden event that is widespread or that is localized, that is natural or human caused, that causes death, injury or disease. Are people dying and being injured by this thing? Yes. Is there damage to property, infrastructure or the environment? Yes. Is there a significant disruption to human life as a result of this load shedding? Yes. Is it of a magnitude that exceeds the capacity of those responsible to manage it, that is ESCOM, to solve it on their own? I think, yes, it is. But if you go to the bone of it, I do not think that it was actually the right route. What they could have done, they could have mobilized resources without having to actually go into declaring a national state of disaster. But then if you look at it, I'm of the view that they are actually using not the correct approach to resolve this issue. Why I'm saying that? Look at the issues that are causing load shedding. How did load shedding start? It didn't just start overnight. It started because we misplaced the priorities. We geared into climate change and renewables without actually knowing that those technologies can save us. There was a lot of money borrowed overseas in order to push this climate change agenda, but no money was given to ESCOM in the process. There was no maintenance of ESCOM. We neglected building a massive nuclear plants. I mean, even the costs were involved in that. So we have neglected a lot of things that could have saved us. And I'm of the view that at the moment, the only hope for South Africa to end this load shedding is a proper investment into ESCOM, revamp these coal power stations. Right now, they're actually closing them. They've closed one in Mpumalanga. They've also scheduled to close the other ones within the next decade. So that is going to cause a massive gap in the supply of electricity. I don't think that the supply of generators and solar panels and all things are actually going to help the economy. Will they help the households? Perhaps they will do, but the broader economy runs on massive power, not just little power that comes from these generators and solar panels. So we need to go back and ask ourselves, why are we having this electricity challenge, and how can we go back and actually fix it? I don't think declaring a state of disaster alone is the right solution.
Certainly sounds a bit like putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg, Dr. Dube, and one wonders if they should change the wording of the gazetted provisions to a state of self-created disaster. Dr. Dube there, thank you for your time on the national state of disaster declared by the President during the State of the Nation address.